Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Those Two Geeks. He's Alex. I'm Joe. It's a Sunday night of all places, which is a very odd time for us to record. And if I'm being truthfully candid, this is going to be a redo because we attempted this before, and it was sleep deprivation, dog noises,
It,
everything.
it was one of those shows that I don't know how much context we had in it.
Yeah,
We were chatting away.
yeah,
Just and half the time we forget we're talking. So
exactly.
we figured
So,
that it was also one of those shows that we were probably less proud of
yes,
than normal. So we figured, you
agreed.
know what? We're awake. It's only been out for a day.
Yeah,
If any of you have listened to it, hey, you get a bonus episode under the same thing.
right, exactly.
If you haven't
So,
listened to it, then you have no idea what we're talking about.
yep. And before we go any further, we're going to talk about my excursion and journey to AEW Collision on Thursday this past week at the behest of AEW. I was a guest along with some other people from the convention that I know. Some will remain named, some will remain unnamed, just for posterity. And I want to go any further before I start, preface it that the words and opinions that are about to come out of the mouth of Joe only reflect Joe and no other human being on the planet. And I say that because I am an avid wrestling fan, a passionate wrestling fan, and it's sometimes a little too critical where I shouldn't be, or where I should be. It depends on where you sit. But in all fairness, just because I have a thought doesn't mean it's been spun to gold and it has to fall out of my mouth. So this is a little bit of a
Do you,
teaching humility.
so genuine question, and
Sure.
behind the curtain, we often tend to be very honest and candid
Extremely.
with what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yes.
Is this a disclaimer you think we should use more often?
No, I think wrestling is one of those extremely polarizing things
Yeah.
that it already exists with tribalism, which I think I've said multiple times on the show, and I'll say it again. I don't understand tribalism.
No.
As a
Yeah.
wrestling
Agreed.
fan, I always come from the point of more wrestling, more opportunities for the guys and gals and people involved of all kinds
Well,
and
that's
all
just it, right? Like
genders is
I'm
a good thing.
I'm not a TNA fan. I don't remember the
Right,
last time I watched TNA.
right.
I couldn't tell. I could tell you Joe Hendry and
Yeah.
Alex Kelly are the only TNA
Well,
wrestlers I
Alex
can
Shelley's
think
in
of.
WWE now with
Okay, so
Chris Sabin as the Motor City Machine Guns.
all right, so moot point. But
Yeah.
those are the only TNA wrestlers I can think of who at the time were there. Obviously, Alex Shelley's not. So that doesn't mean that I think, oh, TNA sucks. We shouldn't have it. Hey, man,
Right.
I'm happy we have a TNA
I
because
am
it
too.
means that there's like I know we've said this before, but there's more places for people to go and enjoy it.
Yeah.
It being wrestling,
I just don't
and
understand because this tribalism doesn't seem to convert to other things. Like I've never heard a person, literally, I've never heard a person go, "Oh, I love Burger King, but fuck McDonald's." Like never.
I
It's like if one of them is open, more than likely, if you like one, you're gonna like the cuisine at another because they're
yeah,
comparable, and you're gonna go.
I've
So
like don't get me wrong, I prefer. I mean, if we're going to talk fast food, and this seems to be where we're going,
yeah, there we
I
are.
I I prefer Wendy's over the other two.
Same. I
But
agree.
that doesn't mean I'm gonna go. Oh, I'm really hungry. Oh, there's no Wendy's around. Well, I'm not going to Burger King and McDonald's.
Right.
Fuck it.
Exactly.
I prefer AEW to WWE, and you're vice
Yes.
versa.
We
I
are. I am
prefer,
vice versa. Yes.
yeah, and I mean we can still get on, right? But
Yeah.
I prefer the longer matches in ring.
Right.
Oh, your dog's shaking. My cat's
Oh,
apparently
God. I
there's
mean,
two of
I,
them
I
in here
can't
now.
escape the him shaking thing. It's always happening. It's like
So
he
whatever
just
you want to
picks
leave.
this show to do it. It's the
Yeah,
weirdest thing. But my thing is too, um, is like I love AEW, so I want to preface that.
yeah.
It's where my criticism sometimes can be maybe a little too harsh, and I have criticism of WWE too.
Uh-huh.
If I see something that I love, truly, truly love,
Oh, fuck.
and it's not up to the level that I love it at, I'm going to talk about it because I
I
want
rem-
it to be at that level.
I remember what you were saying about a certain wrestler on social media. We said it off camera, so I'm not going to bring it up
Mm-hmm.
on camera. But I remember what you were saying. That's like, my God, that's harsh, and
Right.
yet entirely fair. entirely fair. And I think that's what you don't criticize out of a place of hate. And I think there are
No,
too many people that criticize things from a deliberately trying to get negative. Anyway, we're going into a discussion about criticism, which is fine, but not ultimately what we were going to talk about today.
no,
So
no. And
you were at the Collision taping, right? And
I was lucky enough to be afforded to be a guest at the Collision taping with someone I'm extremely close to, and we enjoyed it a lot. And we've had him on the show. It's my cousin Steve, who is also known as Rhode Island's own Peter Griffin, and we were there with a couple of our con friends, like convention friends, for those who aren't in the know. And besides me, there was like three other wrestling geeks that are just like they consume wrestling like by a spoon and just eat it all up like I am.
Yeah.
So they're entrenched. The ironic thing is Steve is quite a bit of a novice when it comes to wrestling, and he'll tell you so, but he still enjoys the product. He loves interactions, he loves crowds. And yes, he probably knows more WWE than AEW. And to be fair, that's only because I shove it on him. You know what I mean? And like
yeah,
he
yeah,
keeps
yeah.
up with it. Yeah. So he's a very casual wrestling fan. He knows a few of AEW. He knows MJF quite well. He's aware of him. I think you'd have to be under a rock to not know MJF. Um, so, but he doesn't really have an opinion one way or the other. And you know, it's good. It's something that you know is a bridge to certain things. So he was there as a guest, and we didn't know what was going to go on. We were told that there was a possibility of him being used in some capacity. So for himself, why wouldn't he go? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
So here's a question in regards to that.
mhm, yeah,
When he goes to these places, oh, we might use you, we might not. Does he then have to be, and I assume he is, but does he have to be almost turned on to his character in
yeah,
advance so that
I think
he's
so.
like he's almost got to slip in the character and then go to the show as opposed to just going as himself to enjoy.
But here's the brilliant thing about him, and I think that's something that I don't give him enough credit for, is there's not really much of a slip into character. This is
It's just
kind of
there.
who he is before he came up with this. He's
Yeah,
always been very relatable as is. He's always been extremely entrenched in comedy. He's always been good to want to make people laugh. He loves making people laugh. He truly does.
yeah,
Now, sometimes, you know, comedy, depending on who says it you know, sometimes it's inappropriate. Sometimes it's, you know, not as well received as you'd like it to be. And I think there's a tough challenge for him these days now, especially with social media, cancel culture, and all those kinds of things, to have to tread those lines. So,
hmm
and I respect that. He would probably go further than I would, and I also give him credit for that courage because sometimes even I'm like, "Whoa, I more
I
power to
would.
you, man."
Yeah,
You
if
know?
you can say it and get it, but again, I
Yeah,
think it's also if the audience you've built and the reputation you've got,
yeah,
right?
exactly. And I also think too, it's also helpful that the character he's portraying and riffing off of is known for that kind of brash, outlandish, honest humor. Like
Yep.
Peter Griffin in the show gives no fucks. So Peter Griffin, the character and the real life person, keeps up with that model in some respect. But we went, I got to tell you, I was blown away by the seats, was like something I just didn't expect. I knew we would get good seats because he's a guest, but we
Yeah.
were right behind the commentary table the entire night. Like we were literally behind the commentary table. And when you watch it back on TV, because what I did last night, you gain an even higher respect for it where you're like, holy crap, we were like right. I mean, pretty much could reach out and touch the wrestlers almost.
Here's another follow-up question. So we've kind of had this conversation between us already, so but
Yeah,
not at the same time,
right.
which means I'm going to interject more than I normally would have with you.
Oh, that's perfectly
How,
fine.
what's the difference for you watching something on TV versus watching it in person? Now, I'm specifically in this case meaning AEW because I know you've seen WWE in person
Yeah, there's
and on
no,
camera. So
it's a huge difference. So I liken it to like watching the Red Sox or baseball on TV versus watching it live. I am much more inclined and more likely to have a brilliant time watching something live, especially baseball, than I am to watch it on TV just by the nature of it. because it's tends to be very dry by nature. Like baseball tends to be very low key commentating. You know, I always have that old school like announcer's voice in my head whenever I hear baseball. It's like swing and a miss, foul ball, swing and a miss, foul ball. I mean, you hear that like a
Mm-hmm.
thousand times a night. When you're there, though, you're soaking up the energy. You're hearing the crowd take on, you know, the personality from, you know, watching the show. I'm not watching shows. Sports are not shows. Watching the live event. And
Yeah.
so with wrestling, it's just picture that dialed up to like 11. When I first went to wrestling events, like I went to one in Madison Square Garden when I was very little, about 8 years old. It's a famous story. But when I started going again in my teens, when I got back into the Attitude Era, when I got like as heavy as I could possibly be into wrestling as I am now, and I've never looked back, I remember going with my mom and dad sitting down, and it really took me out at first that you can't hear the commentary. Like I forgot as a kid that you couldn't hear the commentary. Like I thought there would be like a PA or something that would like connect you. You're
It's
almost
funny. I
telling
always
your own
always
story.
thought, yeah, I always thought the same thing, and that's also why in many cases when it's, oh, there's a local wrestling show, you interested? I'm like, for me, it's
Because
the
yeah, because you're like
commentators add
the
a
commentary adds
huge
so
level to it.
much context.
Yeah.
So much. Like, yeah, as a avid wrestling fan and a very schooled wrestling fan, I can glean a lot of context that doesn't get
Yeah.
by me because I'm so entrenched in it now. I've worked with it, I've been part of it, that it's easy. It's second nature to me. Like I can pretty much hear the commentary in my head. I
Hmm.
do say this though, I think promos come off better live. I
Oh,
don't
I
know
would
what it
say that.
is.
Yeah.
Promos definitely come off better live than watching them at home. So, with that aside, I would prefer to watch it live. I've been to one pay per view in my life, and it was in Providence, ironically. Backlash 1999, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock, and that was just an amazing pay per view to be part of with Shane McMahon,
I
Vince
think I
McMahon,
don't.
all that.
I think I watched that live,
I love that. It's so
or
good.
watched a recording of it because
Yeah,
it would have started at 1 a.m.
yeah.
UK
For
time,
you, it would
and
be a different time, exactly.
yeah, I was like, I'm not watching this. Like,
But
yeah. Anyway, that's
when we were no, it's okay. But then when we were there Thursday to bring it back, and I love the setup for AEW, the staging and whatnot. It's a little more subdued than WWE's humongous Titantron and stage and all that. I think the way AEW has it, you feel more close to the ring. The way it's
mm.
set up, it just feels like there's not as much space between you and the talent. I don't know. I could be wrong. It might logistically be the same,
It
but it feels different.
sometimes it's the optical illusions that they do, where if everything it feels tighter, then it has a
Yeah.
more of an intimate show. Now, I know we've said before that, yeah, or it's been around that there's always, AEW arenas tend to be more empty than WWE arenas, but I think
Right.
we even said before, or we had a theory on that, is that they would have probably sold the same amount of tickets, but the bigger arenas have a nicer set of facilities for fans, parking.
Right. Right,
So
which is interesting because people will often say, "Why would you buy out a large arena if you were only going to fill it to like 50% capacity?" And those are the kind of things that, me not as a business owner would say, that makes no sense to me. I would just get the smaller arena and pack it to the gills. But now, like you say, having like the better facilities, having the better access, parking, all the amenities, maybe that makes up for whatever the gate is. I don't know. But I will say that on TV live, you can't tell the difference because
no,
the
no, you
crowd
really can't.
reaction is just as if was capacity. And that's one of the things I wanted to go into, but like I wanted to go into my first pop of the night. I have never seen Nigel McGuinness live. So I forgot that he commentates Collision. And when he sat down, I popped like a son of a gun.
He
I
uh
was like,
he
oh my God, it's Nigel.
he did Dynamite this week too.
Yeah. And then I forgot Shivani. So I've never seen Tony Schiavone live because I never have been to any WCW show in my life. Never. It's one of those things that I highly regret because I wish I was there in its heyday, but I've never had the ability to go live. I don't know. I was a WWE guy all the way,
Yeah.
WWF guy back then. It was just not tribalism, but I was just like, if I had the chance to go to two WWF shows or a WCW and a WWF show, I'm going to take the two WWF shows. So that's what I did. But so it's cool to see Shivani, but I popped huge for Nigel McGuinness because I've been a big fan of Nigel McGuinness since the ROH days. I even followed him in TNA as Desmond Wolfe. I really enjoyed that. So it was cool for me. But one of the bigger, most crazy non-wrestling related pops for me of the night was I forgot. We're in Providence, Rhode Island, and directly across from the Hasbro headquarters. So we were the second row behind commentary. Really not much difference between second and first row. We're just like
No,
right
there
up
wouldn't
there.
be at that point. Yeah.
But the Hasbro team happened to sit in front of us. And I recognized him instantly. And I was like, holy shit. I'm like, you're Dwight Stahl. And he's like, yeah, I am, dude. And I was like, oh my God. And I mucked
How
out. And
how do they react to being recognized? It must be
dude,
so bizarre for
he
them.
loved it. He got a kick out of it. I didn't get to really do the same with Ryan Ting. I'm not sure. I don't think it's anything negative towards me. I just think Ryan, they seem to be there with their wives or significant others. And, they were just trying to find their seats. It was literally right
Yeah.
before the show started going. So, but like, yeah, I was like, can I take a picture with you? He was like, fuck yeah. So we took a picture and like, it was the first picture I sent to anybody. And like anyone who knew I went to AEW was like, who's this guy? I don't know who this guy is. And I keep forgetting now everyone's a toy fan. But there are a lot of toy fans in AEW.
Oh,
Evil Uno, Brody King,
yep.
Danhausen. We could go on.
I mean, Ethan Page was there for a long
Oh, he
time.
was Yeah. What's it called? Collecting by Julian or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and then you said Brody King.
I said Brody King, but yeah. So keeping on point with Brody King, and this is a happy segue. That was the first match of the night. The House of Black came out, and it was like incredible to see them live. I am such a big fan of Tommy End, aka Malachi Black, aka was it
Alistair Black.
Alistair Black? Yeah, it was Alistair
Yeah,
Black and
he
Malachi
kept
Black.
the same last name when he went from
Yeah,
WWE to
yeah.
AEW.
He is such an underutilized talent that
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe isn't doing more. I'm not saying the House of Black is doing nothing. So no, again, the thoughts and words that are going to pop out of my
I
mouth are a reflection of me only, but I feel I have the right to say them. So if you
so
disagree
I
with them,
think
disagree with them.
I think what because I kind of agree with what you're saying, and I say this knowing where you're going with this, because we've again
Yeah,
halfway had this off camera.
exactly.
I know that with AEW, the roster is so stacked with
It's an
people you
embarrassment of
want.
riches.
It's
It's an
it's
embarrassment of
it
riches.
absolutely is, and I recognize that Tony has ROH and
Right.
AEW, and they're trying to get an ROH TV deal,
Right.
which incidentally I think is why Jericho has the belt again.
Yeah.
But
And
when it comes to the amount of talent they have, and they have some fairly big names, but they have
they do.
a absolutely hugely insane number of people that you want to see more of,
Right.
that are hugely talented, and either they don't get the TV time that they
Right.
should get, or or maybe they're happy being off camera for a bit. Because I know when it comes to Pac, he's
Yeah.
often in the UK for extended periods, and then he'll come back.
Right.
You see him featured for a good chunk, and then he vanishes again.
Right. Exactly.
And I'm fine with that, because I love watching Pac perform,
I've loved him
and
as Neville. I thought he was just fantastic, and that was
he's
the
absolutely
opposite there. He
fantastic.
wasn't really featured there too well
Yeah. And
in
so
WWE.
when
I
it
mean,
comes to House of Black, like I could watch House of Black every single week
I could too.
without fail. However, I wonder how much of that is because I don't get them enough. Like if I got them every week,
Would you be
would
sick of them?
I be sick of them?
Well,
And I mean that I don't know if there's a way to answer that question, but it's something I was thinking about.
I think there's a way to answer it. It's yes and no, and it sounds like a cop out answer. No, if they're done and written
Yeah.
and promoted as well as they should be. Yes, if
If they're not.
they're not. And that's the thing. Like, I don't like to compare. We started this with saying I don't understand tribalism. I don't get it. I still don't get it. And if I say something like I love the bloodline, does not mean I dislike AEW. It just
No,
means
God,
maybe I
no.
want more from AEW. So I want to preface this also. Like, we're going to jump around a lot.
Oh
I
wow.
have been supported and an avid supporter of AEW since day one. I was at the very first Dynamite in Boston. That was the second Dynamite ever. And I was at every single Dynamite and show at the Agani Arena in Boston once AEW started. And I was there for a good 2.5 years, every single show that they did. And I went happily. And I think what happened was there was a honeymoon phase with AEW
Mm.
because I don't care what people say. Roman Reigns was never hot until Paul Heyman made him the tribal chief in 2020. Go back and watch him from 2012 to 2020. He was reviewed as shoved down your throat, insufferable. And why? Not because clearly now we know that Roman Reigns isn't a superior talent. It's just because they didn't know what to do with him exactly. And I will say this, wrestling's this really funny animal. It's not, people say, oh, it's acting. It isn't, it isn't. Because you can have Johnny Depp go play a grizzled detective, or you can have him play a very flamboyant um, pirate, and he could do both stellar, and they're both called acting.
Hmm.
I think with wrestlers, you need a sense of organic inside material in order to be successful. For example, Roman Reigns may not be successful as, if he came out with wristbands and a backwards hat like John Cena, or a cap like John Cena, you'd laugh him off the stage. You just wouldn't buy it.
I actually think you can be even more specific with that with Roman Reigns,
Yeah,
because the tribal chief as a
is him.
character is fantastic and it's so well
It's
received.
brilliant. But it's
The
based in lore that
Yep,
exists, and
but
it's just his
the
family.
yeah, and yet then when you had the big dog when he was in
Awful.
the
Oh my god.
armored armor thing,
Oh,
it didn't resonate because
I
that
hated it
wasn't
so
him, and
much.
he couldn't find a way to buy into it. So
Right.
that's a even more specific example. It
Yeah.
doesn't always work. I mean, look at Glenn Jacobs with Isaac Yankem.
Oh my god.
It's
Yeah. Absolutely. But you
right.
bought him as Kane.
It Yeah, exactly. And did you ever buy him as Kane?
Hmm.
And so then you have Triple H as Jean Paul Levesque, the aristocrat, kind of worked, and
Yeah.
then he became Triple H, and then you're like, yep, there we go. And
There we go.
it wasn't
Exactly.
the first iteration of the character Hunter Hearst Helmsley
Hmm.
wasn't that different that from Jean Paul Levesque.
Yeah.
Whereas then you go into the Triple H we know today, or the game version of the character.
Hmm.
It's If it wasn't for the game, I don't think you would have any real idea who Triple H was now. Like you
No.
would, oh hey, there's this new guy doing the backstage stuff at WWE. Okay, cool,
Yeah.
because his character wouldn't have resonated.
No. And resonation's a big thing.
Hmm.
But there's also differences. So I've always said, and it's easy to armchair quarterback things. I'm a big time football fan too, and that's just the way I am. It's very easy to armchair quarterback things when you're not in the minutia of the daily
Hmm.
business every day. But I will still armchair quarterback it. I have always said that AEW's biggest downfall to me, the one, they have an embarrassment of riches that people could do anything with, but they also have a finite amount of time. You just have so much talent, you can't show and showcase them all
Yeah.
consistently. But two, there has been so much time, and correct me if I'm wrong, and anyone can say this if they listen or if I meet them in person. Um, AEW's biggest downfall is they worry too much about what WWE fans think. Don't give a shit about what WWE fans think. Think about just focusing on AEW fans
Hmm.
as much as you can. Because I will tell you, as a person who loves all of it, if you're a carbon copy of WWE, I'm just going to watch WWE because I have no reason to double up. But if you're
I
giving me something different on a consistent basis, which is what they did for a while, MJF, I think, was the saving grace of that company. And I famously said he could be a WWE killer. It didn't turn out to be that way because the bloodline became more successful than we could have ever presumed. But it wasn't for the fact that MJF isn't good. He's stellar. He's a
mhm.
committed guy to his gimmick. And he's a scholar of wrestling like no one else. Is he a prick? Yes, he is a fucking prick because that's all people have seen of him so far. I've seen him as a prick. I can't, in person, but I can't vouch for him. I can only glean the fact that he's got to be a really nice guy. He's just so
I
committed to his gimmick because I look at how every one of his colleagues talk about him,
yeah,
and
you
it's
don't get the
always
reputation
positive.
he has if you're
Exactly.
actually a dick,
Exactly. So he's
right?
very
Like
good at his craft.
he's even when you saw him come in as in character during the press junkets after the pay-per-views.
Oh,
He
brilliant.
he was he was a dick, but you notice how he remembered people's names and he carried on bits from
Yeah.
the previous press junket.
Yeah.
Like that's a talent, and I think that, like, going back to what you were saying about how you don't want to be a carbon copy of
No,
WWE. I don't watch WWE for a
I know
reason,
you don't. Right.
right? I'll check out bits and pieces, but I'm not consistently involved in watching WWE. I get updates from you, from Matthew,
Yes, we're very
occasionally
big
from,
fans. Huge.
and that's fine. Like I
Yeah.
no reason not to be. I'll occasionally check certain things like, oh, wonder what's going on here. But ultimately, for the most part, I'm more interested in AEW, and I know that there's not as much long term storytelling yet.
Correct.
I think that's starting to change with the Death Rider stuff.
I think it has to change. I think it's
I
very
think it does.
important
I
because I'll say this, like, and I'll interject here and there too.
yeah, absolutely.
I am the biggest fan of WWE, and I'm not gonna. Listen. This is our podcast. I do have to be somewhat as candid as I can be because I need to be authentic. I'm going to say right now that WWE annihilates AEW in storytelling. 100%. It is so enthralling. They have that secret sauce of how to captivate you and elevate guys and just move the pieces around in the right way. And I'll say that's Mr. Paul Levesque and maybe
Hmm.
a couple others. Uh, what's it called? Factor. This was not the way with Vince McMahon. I've loved WWE since I was a little kid. The first pay per view I ever saw in my life, first wrestling show I was ever exposed to was on closed circuit television pay per view. WrestleMania 3, the first thing I ever laid eyes on was Randy Savage versus Ricky Steamboat. It's still my favorite match to this day. I think it's the textbook wrestling match. It's a perfect match. It is as long as it needed to be. It was as well as it needed to be, and is memorable, and it will never, ever, ever fade from me. What that pay per view is more remembered for is Hulk Hogan slamming Andre the Giant in a less than stellar work rate match, but because of the moments. WWE is superior at giving you moments that last. Sometimes I can't tell you the match, but I can tell you the promo or I can tell you the spot or something just because they're that good at it. However, AEW has my favorite match of the year right now. Unequivocally, my favorite match of the year is Bryan Danielson versus Swerve Strickland at All In London.
Mm.
Now, it could be because I'm biased and a huge Bryan mark, but I'm also a diehard Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes. Wow,
Cody.
Cody Rhodes. I mixed the two of them. Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns fan. But I will
So
admit they had a better moment at WrestleMania 41. But Bryan and Swerve was stellar in the ring, and I was on the edge of my seat. And that's a kudos. Some
I
things
agree. I agree.
AEW does better. And for you, who it's not you have a less attention span because you read 60 books a week. Like you have such a fucking, knowledge base, but you're more likely to not watch a bunch of talking heads in a wrestling ring. You want to just be like Mills Lane and be like, let's get it on and
Yeah,
just watch it
I watch wrestling primarily
for
for
wrestling.
the athleticism of the show, and
Right.
then like I know you're the same. Like I don't always like being spoon fed details.
Right.
So trying to catch things at either via the commentary,
Yeah.
via looks in the ring, that kind of thing. Like it's I think AEW is more performance based and
It's
less
definitely more performance based.
like talking. I
Yeah.
think that there's a reason you haven't outright heard what John Moxley's plan is if he's working for someone, because
Right.
that's part of the fun.
And we
Whereas I
speculated
think
off camera, and that's the thing too, is like you've also kind of told me before off camera, but we'll say it on camera.
yeah,
Um, I don't understand the disconnect as a wrestling fan, and maybe it's because I'm too biased. I don't understand how kayfabe, and that means in storyline wise, for anyone who's new to wrestling, how you're going to have a group like John Moxley and the Death Riders run your company into the ground and just stop it at every turn, but yet you, the real life CEO, is going to come out and introduce yourself to the crowd every single Dynamite and every single Collision and welcome them to the show. Now, you told me that that's no more difference than a director of somewhere on Broadway coming out and letting you know everything you see from this point on is the program. I am not the program. I am inviting you to the program. And I get that that works for Broadway. For me, I guess I'm just so old school that I would rather Tony Khan come out and be outraged at John Moxley. But it's
And
you made a very interesting twist, and I hope somebody hears this. It would be
and
redeemable if he was trying to take the Bucks, take it back from the Bucks by using John Moxley, and I think that would be a brilliant
yeah,
swerve.
I think that's where, as wrestling fans, you've almost got to accept the fact that, hey, this guy Tony Khan is a fan. He's here. He's excited you're at his show.
Of course,
He's going
and
to
that's
introduce
genuine.
himself,
He's genuinely
right?
excited.
He's going to introduce himself. He's going to welcome you. Hope you enjoy the show, and then you're not going to see him again because from that point on in the show, he's technically not around. You know he's in Gorilla. Like as a fan, you know he's there.
The fourth wall has broke,
but
and then it gets closed again.
Exactly, and I think that's the difference is that he treats it. Hey, from this point on, it's the show. Anything you see at home is the show, and I think he allows his wrestlers to be themselves when they're quote unquote off the clock.
Yeah.
MJF refuses to be anything other than MJF.
He's just him all the time. And he does it so brilliantly to the point where you're like, oh, this must be him. I disagree, and I'll call bullshit on it all day long. And somewhere down the line, 10 years from now, I will be proved right. Where oh yeah, that was just a shtick. That was me in character the whole time.
You get Brody King, who's this big menacing dude.
And then he goes toy hunting.
And he goes toy hunting. You're like,
and he's lovable.
I could get a cup of coffee with this guy. Like I feel like Brody King is the kind of guy that you could vibe with over music, over I don't know if he drinks, but you know what I mean, like over like a cup of coffee or whatever. I think that's the kind of the difference between people that are in character on the show, and then they're happy to be shown as who they are off the show.
Oh, my dog is caught. Sorry. Okay, Brady, stop. Jesus. My dog got caught. He got his nail caught in a pillow.
Oh,
so sorry, folks. Oh,
no.
He was so upset about that.
Yeah.
It's okay, handsome. Oh my God. Yeah. My dog is next to me, guys, whoever's listening. But yeah, that hurt. That really hurt. I'd rather him do that now than like do that when I'm not home tomorrow.
Oh,
and be stuck for hours that way.
Yeah, because that would be miserable if you couldn't get that off.
Yeah. So the thing is, I want to say this and be honest again. I don't want to be like a suck up or anything like that, and I'm not. So, and you're about to laugh. I respect Tony Khan because he is an absolute wrestling fan. There's nothing wrong with being a wrestling fan. I just, in my personal opinion, again, out of the words of Joe, I think it's too much of an undertaking for him sometimes that even he doesn't realize it. Now it's either it's like a Bill Belichick refusal to like admit that there's work to be done and other people can do the lifting with you, or it's the fact that maybe he thinks this is the best route to go. But I think he would benefit highly from assistance in a creative team, because you got to remember, he's the CEO, he's the promoter, he's the guy who's in and out. He probably doesn't sleep very much. None of these guys. I was going to say,
I think that when it comes to Tony, I think he would absolutely benefit from having a team around him. Absolutely, so. But I wonder if he just hasn't found people that match his vision yet.
I think Bryan Danielson is an absolute match for him.
I agree.
Brian Danielson was booking Collision.
Yeah, I agree.
For a spell. And I'll tell you, those Collision episodes were fabulous.
I'm willing to bet Brian Danielson is still helping behind the scenes, working remotely.
Like I would in a very limited capacity at this point.
I would be shocked if he wasn't helping in some capacity, just because like the guy loves the business.
He thoroughly loves it.
And I think Tony is also a huge mark for the business.
Very.
Right. Like even if they're just bouncing ideas back of each other, back and forth. So
I think he's also almost apologetically too much a huge mark for some of his talent, though, sometimes. And that's an issue, because you have to be a general, right? Sometimes you have to be a prick. Sometimes you have to be like, that's great what you want, but this doesn't match the vision of the product.
He's definitely got got that sense to him, because if you've been paying attention to what's happening with the Lucha Brothers,
Yeah.
they have both outright said that they want to go to WWE,
Oh yeah.
but because they were injured or whatever with their contract,
Yeah, he added time on. Yeah.
he's like, "Hey, you still owe me time," and then he hasn't used them.
Yeah.
He hasn't used them despite technically they're still under contract. So
Well, yeah, I think there's some animosity there sometimes too. I mean, he's
one
a wrestling fan.
100%, and I think that there's a difference between. I mean, look at what happened with. I mean, John Moxley wrestled without a contract,
Yeah, on a handshake
right?
deal for a long
Yep,
while.
for quite a while. And he's had Ethan Page did his thing and then quietly left. Ethan has never once said anything about wanting to go anywhere
Right.
until
I
he was
think
already
Ethan
there.
had to. He had
E-
to.
I think that's where what going back to, pulling it back to what we were talked about earlier in the episode, the different avenues, options, companies
Yes.
for wrestlers to go to. Ethan Page is, for me, he's fantastic to watch. He's very magnetic on screen. I just
Oh,
like
he's
watching him.
so good. I love watching him.
I think he thrives far more on NXT than
Yes.
he did in AEW.
I
Whereas
agree.
conversely, I think you've got someone like
Ricochet.
Ricochet, yeah,
Yep.
who had reached his ceiling in WWE.
Absolutely.
Whereas in AEW, it's like, oh shit, that's Ricochet. Bobby
Yeah, Ricochet
Lashley,
is going
Shelton
to be
Benjamin,
potentially a AEW champion, and I can see
easily.
that for sure
And
because they
yeah,
know how to use that type of character.
exactly. And I think that's where it benefits everyone, is that you've got different places for different characters. And I think in 10 years, you can have storylines following wrestlers between promotions. I think
I think so too.
you might have, hey, MJF's going to work with WWE for a year and a half. Okay, cool. This is what we've done leading up to. All right, perfect. We'll carry that on here, and then maybe he'll go to
I would
TNA for a bit.
hope that would be a golden age. I don't know
Wouldn't
if
it?
that's ever gonna happen, but I
I
think it would
think
be beneficial. I think
I can I can see it, because you've had Kenny Omega was a TNA champion for while he was in
right.
AEW, right? So
Yep.
it can happen. I
Right.
think that you've got to have some really clear-headed people at the head, or
Yeah.
almost one. Hey, this is the overarching story director for
Yeah.
everything. He isn't employed by anyone, like
Right.
any one company specific, like independent contractor. But this is where who's guiding conducting our orchestra, so to speak.
I think you have to look at it this way too. Like Punk is one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. He's on my Mount Rushmore of wrestling. Famously, everyone doesn't
Hmm.
understand that, but he is. And he said on the Ariel Hawani podcast that he has no animosity towards Tony Khan. And I believe he doesn't. I don't know if Tony has animosity towards him. I think it's more of like Tony was such a fan of Punk, and Punk maybe been like a little bit of a hero to him. But Tony looks at these guys like I look at them, like heroes
Mm,
sometimes, not just guys in tights walking around. You're in awe of these people when you grow up. There's a nostalgia that just tugs you. And I think having your hero work with you, work for you, is something that is so overshadowing, and like you're just in awe of it, right? Because he
hmm
bent over backwards to give Punk whatever he wanted. Here's the thing, and I think even CM Punk will tell you this. That is probably not the best way to handle CM Punk. CM Punk needs a bit of structure. CM Punk needs kind of a general. And he said Tony Khan's a nice guy. He's one of the nicest guys they ever met. But he's not a take charge, when it needs to be done sometimes because of the concern of somebody's feelings or whatever. And we won't go into why I'm not the biggest fan of Jack Perry, but the read on it. The evidence is there. Oh, but we will go into Jack Perry in a little bit. But the thing is, whereas Triple H is not going to take any shit from him and say, you want to work here? Then this is how you go down. This is how it does. And I think someone like CM Punk thrives on it because I think Triple H sees the merit in CM Punk, whereas Vince McMahon just saw him as the scrawny tattooed guy that he didn't understand was so amazingly popular. And just
hmm
Vince McMahon had this thing, if you came from the indies, you're never going to be bigger than my homegrown talent. Even if organically, like Daniel Bryan back then, not Bryan Danielson, but Daniel Bryan, they had no choice but to push him famously because the crowd revolted on what they wanted to push.
Yeah.
Now, conversely, that happened again in WWE. History repeats itself. They were going to shove Rock and Roman down our throat. And Cody fans said, no.
It
So
wasn't
Cody,
just Cody fans. That was even like people like myself that we were talking about it here, and I was like, it's ridiculous. Like even as a non WWE fan, I was invested in the Cody Rhodes story.
correct.
And
Because it's
now
that
that he's achieved, he's climbing the mountain. I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I couldn't tell you who his last match was against.
I can, but it's only because I'm a nerd. But like, conversely, that's what I'm talking about. And there's no disrespect, but I will be honest. AEW is missing that hook. So like Burger King and McDonald's, if Burger King comes out with the flaming Whopper, McDonald's is going to come out with the red hot Big Mac. You know what I mean? It's not exact, but it's something to counter it, and something that, because imitation is the most sincerest form of flattery. I think AEW needs that. It needs not the bloodline. If they come out with a bunch of Samoans, everyone's going to laugh them off stage because they're watching it on the other channel.
I think
but the Death Riders might be this.
I was just going to say, I wonder if what we're seeing is the start of that, because the bloodline didn't start.
It didn't start as hot
as it did,
no,
right? It started, it was happening, and then all of a sudden, like people are paying attention
it was
to
built. It was
right.
built
So
brick by brick.
I kind of wonder if that's what we're seeing, because right now we've got the Death Riders, they're trios champion, and they're the world champion.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if Marina Shafir ends up with a belt at some point before this is
I
all
think
over.
she'd get like the TNT champion. Maybe that might happen. Maybe Statlander will beat Mercedes Moné at Full Gear, and maybe Stat will feud with Marina Shafir. Maybe something like that. I really can't. I can't see Marina Shafir going against Mariah May, because it doesn't make sense.
Here's the thing. I think what you're going to see is they're going to take the belts from the people who have maybe either at their prime or have just passed their prime. So this is just my opinion. Like I have no insight. So I can almost see them allowing the younger guns to challenge them and go from there. Because if you think about it, all of the Death Riders are in their mid to late 30s.
Yeah, they're all veterans. They're all vets.
Yeah.
With the exception of Marina. Marina's pretty green, but she's been around the business. She's also been around real life fighting. She's a shoot fighter.
Exactly. Like she's got a reputation of being a badass.
Yeah, exactly. She works great with Moxley. I'll tell you, Jon Moxley is the workhorse, and he is the MVP of AEW. I said MJF was for a very long time. He was. While he was champ, MJF was the MVP. But all around for the past 5 years, Jon Moxley's been the MVP. He's the guy that you give the ball to every time you doubt.
Yeah, if I had to put my Mount Rushmore of AEW wrestlers,
Jon Moxley would be up there.
Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega, MJF.
Without you have a fourth.
I know, but without question, that's the three that I would think.
I agree. I would agree with those three. And then probably selfishly, I'd put Jericho because I'm just the biggest Jericho mark. But if I had to be honest, maybe not Jericho. I'm not sure who would go in that fourth spot.
I would right now. I would consider Tony Storm.
Yeah, timeless Tony Storm is fabulous.
Right. So I would Tony Storm, maybe Britt Baker, DMD, or Dr. Britt Baker.
Yeah.
But even then, like she's kind of fallen off for a little bit. So, but any time you have any kind of like, I mean, case in point, CM Punk doing, getting injured, whatever.
Yeah.
Crap, what do we do? Fuck it, give it to Moxley. Let's see what Moxley can do with it. And
well, look at Bryan Danielson. He wanted to lose to Jon Moxley.
Exactly. So there's something going on with this story, and
I hope so, because I will say this: they are running the risk of no details for too long. You can tune people out, and that's just my opinion.
No, I agree. I think that they're drip feeding you, and you've got to be really attentive to what's being said by Jon Moxley and what's not being said, and the looks that they're giving each other in the ring, and that can be hard to do if you're only catching in highlights and things. But again, I think if you pay attention to what AEW are putting up on the YouTube channel, you're probably going to get the majority of what they're doing.
And so, with that being said, so the episode, we're not going to go through the entire Collision card. You can watch it, but it ended with the trios championship being defended, and John Moxley and Marina Shafir and Claude and yeah, John Moxley and Marina Shafir came out because they were the only two not in the ring. They came out at the end, and I predicted it. And I'll tell you this, not out of negativity, but it saved the show for me because it was less. It was just kind of there. It didn't have a lot of bite to me without that ending. That ending with them giving you that NWO style where, oh, it's gone as far as we want it to go. Now we're going to come in and just assert our dominance was great. But I'll also say this, they have the perfect. I know that I think things are building towards Kenny Omega coming back and being the ultimate savior of AEW. But I will say right now, I think they have the perfect foil for the Death Riders in Orange Cassidy. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
say this, the reason why, because Orange Cassidy is not physically imposing,
No,
but
he's not.
he is presence imposing. He's so good at what he
You
does that he can go
you
from being the guy with
shared
his hands in his pockets to being the guy who stares you down and you see Moxley back off.
you shared a video on Messenger with me.
Yes, about him
Like
talking
it was
about
like
Beyond Wrestling.
like Sunday. No, so Sunday. So I think it was like Sunday morning. You shared it. It was of your view of the show of the
Yeah.
post match breakdown.
Yep.
And Orange Cassidy standing on the table is
Oh, so good. Great
so
visual.
much more like it's just like my God, that's a great. It's
It's a great
just the
visual.
way he stood it. It's a fantastic visual, and he's just standing there. I'm like, there's something with this character, and I can't see him being the one to take the belt off John
No, and
Moxley.
that's the shame because there's like a telegraph there. Because right now, like you said, we're getting drip fed.
Yeah,
And somebody has to take out Moxley eventually, right? Somebody does. But
and
if you do it so soon, you lose all your punch.
the irony is that Moxley. I don't know if Moxley's ever beaten Orange Cassidy.
Yes, he has
Has he?
for the international title.
Oh, he did beat him. Okay, I knew that
Yeah.
Cassidy beat him for that,
Oh, it was so brilliant too.
and then
That was one of my
yes, you're right
matches of
because
the year too.
he took it off
Hmm.
Cassidy, and then Cassidy
And
got
got
it
it
back.
back. Yeah.
And but that was only after Cassidy had been beaten down so bad,
Right.
right? So I love the fact that there's history between them.
Oh
I
yeah,
love the
it
fact
makes
that
sense.
Cassidy is as old as Moxley, but
Yeah.
to look at him, you wouldn't see it. So I
See,
think that
conversely, I think where they're misstepping again, my opinions, and I'm not going to apologize for them. I am such a big MJF fanboy. I adore him as a character. I know he's spit on my belt. He's thrown my belt across the room. He has insulted me, but I still take it in stride. It must be a magic trick that it gets over me. I love him. I think he's one of the greatest heels of all time. But I think he had potential to be one of the greatest faces of all time.
Mhm.
And I don't like how they switched him back because I feel like he would be great in this spot with Orange Cassidy as backup or not backup as side by side. Like the conglomeration needs to have a little bit more star power. And I
Mhm.
think MJF deserves to be in the main event. I don't give a shit. Whatever year it is, MJF deserves to be in the main event of this company. He is the one who put your company. I know Jericho is the first champ, and I loved Le Champion. I mean, I have the shirt, I have the bandana, I have everything. And he's the guy who got me going to AEW along with Cody Rhodes because I've always been a Cody Rhodes guy. But MJF's the guy who kept me here. MJF's the guy who kept me from switching the channels when Cody left because he did something so amazing to me. He did master telling and story, and only other than Vince McMahon can MJF consistently and convincingly weave in and back between face and heel. And you'll buy it each time because he's
Yeah.
that convincing. He's that good. What I don't like right now is I feel he's being wasted. I hate this Adam Cole feud. It has nothing to do with Adam Cole. I love Adam Cole. But I feel like the
It
brainbuster kick in the head when he came back at Double or Nothing for a spell after MJF reappeared, that was it. That was like your cap off to your feud. It was boom.
it
See you later. Let's go on to new things.
I know we've spoken about that before. Like
Mhm.
I just think that it's a case of they're not sure
Where to
what
put
to.
him?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's because I know he's been doing a couple of movies, so that might also
Yeah, Adam
be
Sandler's grow. I don't know.
yeah.
Happy Gilmore too.
So, and you know, more power to him. Do what you need to do to set
I hope
yourself
he's
up for
good
the
because I
future.
love Happy Gilmore. It's one of my favorites. So I really
I
hope he's
I
good.
think this is a topic I think for another day. Because I know
Yeah, yeah.
we're already
So
20 minutes past when we said,
yeah.
but
So
I
go.
think that
Oh, I was going to say, I think for the majority, and this is where I'll leave the topic. There's a most wrestlers can probably transition to acting fairly well.
Right.
So we'll revisit that again at some point. But go back to
Yeah.
what you were
So
saying.
going to the rest of, I just think maybe the thinking is if MJF's in the spot with Orange Cassidy, then why wouldn't just he be the guy to challenge Moxley? You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think maybe he's too big a star. So I get there's a balancing act. It's just they've got to find it. And this is why I liked the two show system. I know it's corny and I know it's WWE esque, but I liked the two show system where you had like the TNT champion with Christian was running Collision, and then you had MJF running AEW and Dynamite because you've
Hmm.
got two different things, you've got two different spotlights. Now with this whole unified situation where John Moxley, basically the shows are two parters. It's Collision is the second part of Dynamite, although I feel like it's lost its identity because that's what made it so special in the first place was even Collision's production felt different when it first came out the first year. Everything was different about it. It was a totally different feel of the show, and it was like you have to tune in. Collision right now, I feel it's fallen into this spot of, well, I'll just catch Dynamite if I don't get Collision, and it'll be explained to me there. And that's kind of a shame because it started off as two very different identities. And when you have that, you have the ability to showcase bigger and better stars because you have more platforms. When you unify it under one house, there's only so much only so much seats at the table to eat food. And that's where it's tough. But as far as being part of the show and being allowed to go there, it was a great time. It was fun. It was long. It was very long. And I'm not saying Collision was wrong. It was just that there was an ROH taping before and an ROH taping after. We can argue that Tony Khan will give you the most bang for your buck as a
I don't
wrestling
even
fan
think you can
because
argue that. I think that's
you no
demonstrably true.
I said it is demonstrably true. He will
Yeah.
give you the most bang for your buck without any extra charge. I think there's a worry of oversaturation sometimes. One taping of ROH, I think, would have been very generous. Two tapings, I think, is a lot. It's a lot for anyone, even the most avid of wrestling fans, to be focused on. Like, Collision ends at 10. We got
Mhm.
out of the arena at around 12:10.
Yeah.
So that's a
It's a
long time from
it's a
6:30.
lot. It's a long day for sure. It's
Yeah,
a 6 hour show, but again, like you said, it's bang
it
for your
was a
buck,
lot of
and
fun. And I'll tell you this too. I
and,
said
and I
we get
think
back to
that's what
Jack
matters.
Perry.
Oh
I said
yeah,
we get
yeah.
back to Jack Perry. It's already out there now. Stevie Oaks, Rhode Island's own Peter Griffin, is embroiled in a feud with Jack Perry. Um, I'll say this: I didn't think it was. I knew I was there. I watched the interaction. It was hilarious. I give Jack credit. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but I think he did the only thing he could do in that situation was use it as part of the
Hmm.
show, and he did a great job. I just never thought it would be captured on air. I was utterly shocked. So when I watched it last night on my own and I saw picture in picture, I said, this makes sense because you're getting nothing but lip service and you can't tell what they're saying. So it's nothing more than like, oh, that's a guy in the crowd dressed up as Peter Griffin. That's funny. No, because there's audio and everything. And Nigel McGuinness has a brilliant line and he's so good. And he's like, oh, Jack Perry's jawing off with Peter Griffin over there. Peter doesn't want none. He's a family guy. He's not getting in that ring. Like just thinking on his feet so well, so quick,
So well.
so English. I mean, it's Nigel,
Yeah,
but I
it
mean,
is.
it's
It is.
just it's just incredible. So like, I want to see it go further. I hope it does. I'm gonna keep some things under my hat that I told you off camera, and it's possible. But I'm seeing the interaction and the response to it on social media. It's overwhelmingly good.
Hmm.
And the other thing was there's a loud Peter chant on air. I didn't think that would make it on air either. I thought it
Did
would
it
be
make
cut
it
in
on it?
post. Oh yeah. I'm gonna send you the clip afterwards. I'll send
Yeah,
you the
send me the clip.
unedited clip. It comes off so great. So
Awesome.
to be part of that for my family member who has been grinding and working so hard with this gimmick and with this profession, I'm very proud. I think it's
Yeah.
great. Are we going to see Peter Griffin take a bump in the ring? I don't know. I kind of advised him during football today. It's not the best idea. I mean, but he could
If
you
it,
see him maybe like distract the ref or something? I don't know.
I, I,
I
I'm
thought
curious.
might be a great
I,
idea that Daniel Garcia benefits from Peter Griffin's interference at Full
I
Gear, but
so I'm I'm going to keep ideas to myself because I don't want to put anything out there or
Right.
or accidentally lay claim to anything. So
right.
I think it's fantastic, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
I can tell you
Um,
this. I think it's more positive than not for what
absolutely.
my cousin is doing, because Tony Khan seems to be the type of guy who's very well aware with cross pollination, and he's very well aware with pop culture. And the fact that he even allowed that on his show in post production is such a fabulous thing
Yeah.
for not only my
Yeah,
cousin, but I just
you
think
can't tell me that Tony Khan is not aware of this.
he's 100% aware that it wouldn't have
Yes.
made it on air. And I just think it's so great that he actually allowed it. I can tell you this right now. Conversely, we were part of WWE a year ago. And during SmackDown, they did everything they freaking could to eliminate that. Like
Yeah.
any footprint of Peter Griffin, because he had a louder chant in SmackDown. But any footprint of that, we had the production guy run over to us and shut us down, basically, and all that. So the fact that Tony was allowing of it is a great thing, because I think he's aware. Also, TNT plays a lot of Family Guy,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of Family Guy reruns. So, or TBS, one of the two. Either way, it's
Either
one
way,
of
it's a
them
channel
evolved
that AEW
with
are
AEW.
affiliated with. So.
Exactly. So I think to capitalize on that is smart too. And let's face it,
Agreed.
Tony Khan's a businessman. So as much as I might poke holes in booking sometimes, I don't doubt the fact that he's not aware of an opportunity. And I don't know what could materialize it. This could have been a very quick one-off, but maybe it's not. I don't know. I just think it's great to be part of it. I'm very grateful for the experience. Was I tired the next day? Absolutely. It could have been a little less longer, but that's okay. You know, he's trying to do as much as he can for the fans. I just think there's a thing of Tony overexerting himself too much sometimes.
Agreed.
I think
And
he's trying to give too much to us and ingratiate himself so much that it might be overwhelming. And it's just like, we just want you to put out the best product possible. We just want you to focus on your talent, keep them safe, keep them smart, and just do the best you can. Stop comparing yourself to WWE,
I
and also
honestly
don't worry
think
about criticisms.
so. I honestly think, and this will be my final thought. I think wrestling is better for Tony Khan being involved.
100%. We've never had anything, and people can argue all the, I hate the AEW tribalism, like the anti AEW tribalism that goes, oh, AEW shit, this and that. I have a bunch of friends who's like that. And I'm like, do you realize that we haven't had the likes of a promotion like this since WCW? And that was like 25 years drought after WCW closed its doors. So many tried. You had ROH, you had TNA, you have New Japan, which is always going to be there, but it's in a different capacity. You had, CZW, XPW, NWA, everything you can think of under the sun. You had Hulk Hogan try to start a promotion. It was like Hollywood wrestling or whatever. You had everybody try, but they failed on this level. None of them. Dixie Carter has a lot of money. She put a lot of money behind TNA. She had stars that you couldn't imagine. She had Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Kurt Angle, Samoa Joe, Booker T, Scott Steiner, Jeff Hardy. She had such a large salary cap of wrestlers, but they couldn't make a dent. Now, I don't care what revisionist history you want to go back to, but when AEW started out in 2019, I will say all the way through 2021, just as the bloodline got really heating up into Roman's first WrestleMania as the bloodline, as the tribal chief, is when the swing started coming back the WWE's way. Because they were running stuff. I was watching AEW exclusively for almost 2 years. I would catch the highlights of WWE, but I got tired of watching John Cena. I got tired of watching the same shit that I was watching over and over and over and over again, month in, month out for years. AEW captivated me. It was new, and that's why I said I think it had a little bit of a honeymoon period. I just think they need to maybe go back to some of those earlier years and grab the well and just kind of look at it and examine it and go, okay, what are we not doing now that we were doing back then? Because Cody Rhodes had one of the greatest promos I've ever heard. It's called the Ellis Island of Wrestling, and it was on one of the first few Dynamites where he said AEW is Ellis Island for wrestlers, and it was an eloquent promo because Cody Rhodes doesn't cut ineloquent promos, and it was just brilliant. And I'm like, man, there's realism here that is not going over in WWE. Also, I'll say this. I know we have final thoughts, but I just have a few more. WWE has copied AEW too. Because if you've noticed, AEW has been doing the media scrum almost from the beginning. And it brings it into like a sports mentality where after a football game, you have the media scrum and you talk and, ask the coaches what they were thinking, what went wrong, and this and that. Gives you that grounded in reality base. WWE never had that until Triple H took it.
Yep.
And now Triple H does it every PLE. He has a media scrum. Tony Khan started that first. And that's a fact. Go back and watch. And it's like you had Raw talk and you had like, SmackDown, talking smack. Nothing compared to this where the media was involved and there was this direct conversal of, media journalists and fans up there versus talent. And that's where MJF thrived the most because he was unapologetically kayfabe himself, just up there ripping people. And like you said, he'd remember people from last time. He would have these. Christian was really good at it too. Christian is so good in his character. This is the best work he's done in his career. And he was a WWE guy for years and years and years. This is the best work he's done because I know, every wrestling person in the planet knows that Adam Copeland and Chris Friends are best friends for life. They're the very best of friends. But Christian is so good at his craft that when Adam Copeland was coming to AEW, if you remember the rumors, Christian goes, I have few friends in this business. I have Luchasaurus, Nick Wayne, myself. They're like, yeah, but what do you think about Adam Copeland? He's like, I have Nick Wayne, Luchasaurus, myself. Now, you could probably tell it's killing him inside and he's dying laughing, but he was so committed to it.
Yeah, it was.
Because that's some of the stuff that AEW does so well. I enjoy their media scrums because they pull back the curtain sometimes, and sometimes they keep a kayfabe. You never know what you're going to get. It's a big difference from Triple H every single freaking PLE. It's almost, me and my buddy Donnie almost say it's scripted to the point where he's like, we just broke every record. We broke every house. There's never been a house like this. I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank the sandwich guys for bringing us the greatest sandwiches of all time. Like there's never a PLE where he's not like, this was great. It wasn't as good as the last one. He's always like, it was better than the last one. The next one will be doubly better. And you're like, how is it always better? Can I see these figures, please? He's never had one that I can look at the show objectively and go, yeah, Backlash wasn't as good as Crown Jewel. And you know what I mean? But he'll, in his eyes, and what he tells the press, it's the best one that's ever happened. So everyone's the best one. Where Tony Khan, I think sometimes will actually be honest and say,
yeah,
it was good. There was a little bit less energy tonight or whatever. He'll be candid. And it's refreshing. Like I said, for AEW, they've got to stop being the opponent of WWE and just start being the proponent of themselves. And I think that's a great way to end it. I do want to thank AEW. I want to thank QT Marshall. I want to thank Steven's Connection. I want to just thank, the house in Providence. I thought it was a great time. I'd love to be back. I just think that wrestling is a very fickle thing and it's very funny. It's tough to grab all the time, but it's not a bad thing. It's because we love it so much. And like I said, without being too wordy and going on and on and on, there's some stuff you like, some stuff you don't like, and there's some stuff to come.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games. you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.